Hi, everyone, and welcome. So, today we are going to discuss The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive. We are doing a read along for all four of the books in 2022, and this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. So, if you haven't read the book yet, I highly recommend just going away, reading the book first. I do recommend reading the book, I think that it was really good, and then come back and watch the video. So, I'm first going to just let everybody introduce themselves, maybe starting with Maza and then going around the room, and then we can start the discussion.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Mazam from Mazda Booktuber. So I do a lot of fantasy stuff on my channel and a lot of horror. As you can see, I have my whole Stephen King collection over here. And then recently I got into a lot of manga, so you're gonna see a lot of manga content on my channel. But I do read a lot of fantasy and a lot of horror, so hopefully you guys can stop by.
I'm Hans. I do have a YouTube channel as well. I don't usually use it, but it's Hans Library Corner. Um, I read as a hobby. I don't do it very often these days because work is busy. But I mainly love fantasy, but I read a lot of different sort of fiction. And I was planning to read the Stormlight Archive this year either way. So this read along came at the right moment.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm from the channel Tea Books Magic, and I think I only started November of last year, so I'm fairly new to. I kind of did it 2 years ago, came back, so I'm newish to my return to BookTube, but it's been really fun. And I am a primary fantasy reader. I don't really read any other genre. I'm trying out a few to see if I can find like in between palette cleansers, but fantasy is where my love is. I love political fantasy. I'm reading a lot more adult fantasy, kind of high epic fantasy. And yeah, political, I love anything to do with like character-driven stories. That's my favorite slide.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and by the way, everybody's channel is linked in the description box down below. If you want to check them out, definitely do so. So just to start, what is your overall feeling about the first book? Do you absolutely love it, or did you have some small remarks about it? So maybe Maria, you can start.
Sure, yeah. I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, so this was a strong book for me. It just wasn't quite a favorite, so it didn't have that like 4.5 5-star potential just yet, but I think this series could go that direction, so I'm really excited. I mentioned when we were just chatting earlier, kind of in our before we went live, that I was giving Brandon Sanderson a second try. So for me, I'd read Mistborn Era 1 and really liked the first book, and then the next two just didn't work for me. So this was kind of my like, I hope that Brandon Sanderson can still be for me, and it worked out well. He's very character driven in this. I feel like he spends a lot of time with the characters, so I loved that. But the things that kind of held it back from being a favorite were one of the character POVs, and then I just think it was too long. I felt like I could feel the 1,000 pages. And I think I'm one of the few people that says that Sanderson reads like 2 times longer for me than any other author. I usually hear the reverse where everyone says that they read it really fast. And for me, it's for some reason the opposite. So I could feel the 1,000 pages. And I just felt like I loved with characters and experiencing those slow moments, but I thought that it could have been a bit more effective. And there were scenes where there were multiples or redundancies, and you could have kind of gotten the same effect by shortening a bit. But other than that, I really enjoyed it overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agree. I had the same feeling that it could have been edited maybe and made a bit shorter, because there were a couple of instances where I had the feeling that he showed something in a conversation, and then in the paragraph after it, he also told you, just to make sure that you definitely understood it. And I thought, well, maybe that could have been edited and just make the story a little bit shorter. But overall, I did really enjoy it. And by the way, welcome, Bryce. I've also linked Bryce's channel down below. We are just telling our general ideas, what we liked or didn't like about the story.
Awesome. So that means it's my turn. I didn't mean to interrupt or anything. You guys are awesome.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's
fine. Thanks for having me on and letting me be a part of this. This is just so cool. I had actually read The Way of Kings way back in the day when they gave out these pretty arcs for it. They were trying to push it, and I remember blazing through it. It was really one of my first tastes of Sanderson, I think, at the time. And so for me, it was, and I, because I get that, Marie, there's like so many authors where I'm like reading so slowly, and this is one for some reason that I don't know, just like hits me right. But I also can't say it's not like I've loved everything that Sanderson's ever done. Like The Rhythmatist, just it was okay for me, but it wasn't like my favorite that I know a lot of people really loved it, right? So I can definitely say I'm not like a I've love everything, but Stormlight Archive for me is just hitting right. I do. It's the opposite of a lot of books that I love and read, that it does kind of explain a lot. And I think even just looking at a 1,000-page tome like this, you could be like, couldn't something have been edited from that when it's book one? But for me, especially on a reread, I don't know. I think it was just a reread really hit me right this year, and maybe just not having the anxiety for these characters or something, that I knew where it was going to head, and anyway, and just like reading it and just loving the moments with. Because I think I really appreciated like the Bridge 4 guys, right? Like those like a lot more than I did the first time. Like they were just like, I felt like a family with them this time, and I was in there with them, and just the respect that Kaladin earns, just from what he does and what he realizes, and almost like his whole anti-Light Eyes stance, but just his. I don't know, just the way that he kind of is like, you know what, you lead from the front, you don't lead from the back kind of attitude. And it really hit me right. And I've had those kind of managers where I've had the ones that are like, I was in a call center job, and I had the manager that was like, you call and they're like, this person needs a manager, and I'm even agreeing with them that they need a manager. And I talked to my manager, and he's like, just deal with it.
Yeah.
And then I had another one in the same company that was always first thing, yeah, get him to me. Like I knew, like he knew he could trust us, and we knew that we could trust him. Like it was like this back and forth, and so he knew we weren't just going to give him any kind of garbage a call or something just because a random person is like, all they did is want immediately the manager, So I kind of like, I guess with my experiences, it was definitely like this. Okay, yes, that's the leader that I want. Shallan, how are we pronouncing that? Shallan.
Yeah.
She's like, I remember the first time, like I struggled with her a little bit. This time, I loved her sassiness and her just like being quick to like. With a like maybe an inopportune or just something back, saying something snarky back and without thinking about it. And I really was like, all right, I love her this time. So I like really enjoyed Shallan this time. Like I maybe might even like be up there with my favorite, this time. So I really enjoyed that. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to take up too much. I could keep going. But that's kind of, my initial take. I'll shut up.
She was my least favorite, so that's really good to know that, like on reread or even just knowing more of her backstory down the line.
Yeah.
Potential.
I do think it will definitely change upon a reread, because I knew that everybody loved it so much, and then the first two parts of the book, I was like, what's everybody talking about? I don't think it was exceptional. So I started to not trust that the book was going to be good, but then starting from part 3, I absolutely loved it. So I think that upon a reread, when you know what's going to happen, yeah, it's definitely going to be better. And that's also what Lila says. Like the first couple of chapters, it takes a while for you to grow into it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Matt in the Wheel of Time. I remember it being like, this is everybody's favorite character. And then like later on, I was like, he's my favorite character. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Maria that it reads. Maybe it does read a little bit. Maybe because I'm used to reading like Stephen King, and Stephen King goes on like the longest tangent sometimes. But I like that. So like I can see how Brandon Sanderson kind of does that too, but he does it in a more like poetic way where it sounds nice. And I have to agree with Bryce. Like freaking Kaladin is freaking amazing. I freaking love the guy. Like I feel like that's the reason why I kept reading, because I think Amy from Reading Things said I really enjoyed the book, but strongly the book needs to be 1,000 pages. I feel like the reason I liked that it was 1,000 pages is because Kaladin had like the biggest point of view, because one of the POVs was with Shallan. It was like whenever I got to it, I'd be like, bro, no, just go away. And also the preludes. Did you guys? I heard some people skip them, and I was like, for real, you guys are skipping them?
Okay.
I got into like Reddit, and I started looking up like the Way of Kings and stuff when I first read it, and some people were saying that they skipped it, and then after the series they're gonna go back and read those, and I was like, What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
I look at it as the, even the parts that you don't like will make you appreciate more the parts that you do like, the like delayed gratification kind of thing. But there's a level where you have to go, okay, no.
Yeah, I think those are stuff that makes only sense backwards. So you need to read them and accept that they're part of the world. And then in hindsight, you can maybe understand why they were included in the book, maybe down the line.
Yeah, I agree. And in general, Hans, did you really like this first book?
I did actually. I would give it a 9 out of 10, I think, or 8.5. But it wasn't Brandon Sanderson's best book. But I think why I loved some of it other works, like Mistborn Era, primarily the first and the last book in that trilogy, and Elantris, is because they were so well made and so well crafted, but they also finished. And this story isn't finished yet. So I think that I love the story, but you could totally feel it was sort of an introduction to the world.
Exactly.
You got a lot of magic systems that I don't understand yet. You got a lot of world building that only made sense at the end of this book. That I love it, but I think it has to lead to somewhere more. It isn't finished yet, so I really loved it. But you could also totally feel it was an introduction of some sorts. And
Hans got a point there, yeah, because when you first start off the chapter, you get dropped off, and he starts using all this magic stuff. I'm like, wait, how does that even work? Like, what is he doing?
I thought he did a great job with that. It was one of the few where I felt like he was giving you enough atmosphere and you could kind of imagine, and then he would later give you images to look at or like illustrations, or then would give you more insight, and so it wasn't all dumped at you at once. So I thought he did a great job.
He did a great job, but it's less explained than in other books, if I can say it like that. In other books, it's you can understand it with the characters, but maybe that's also what he wants in this book. Only this takes a little bit longer because the series is longer. That he wants you to understand with the characters how the magic works, but that is going to take a few books.
And isn't that, I mean, he's got his like rules of magic, right? And he's essentially like, the more that you can understand about his magic system, the more he can use that as part of the plot and how things hinge on that magic system. And that's like his whole goal. But yeah, you're right. I think this is maybe a series that doesn't, or maybe he's just like, I've got 10,000 pages to get to it. So like, I don't know, but I just love the mystery. Like there's so much mystery in this, like void bringers and, the magics, where they come from, the radiance, the Night's Radiant, anyway, it's so great for me.
Yeah, and I think that's like the big difference with Mistborn. There you have you have Kelsier, and he's like, I know this, and I'm now going to teach you. So you get like an entire explanation of the magic system. Like now here in Way of Things, you have people who don't even know that they have magical powers. They don't even know that they're special. So you kind of need to discover it alongside them, which can sometimes also be infuriating because you just don't know what's happening.
And this is going to be like a 10-book series, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
so just a short one.
I think he said the first 5 is like its incomplete arc. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. And I think that we have a time jump then between book 5 and book 6. I'm not entirely sure, but
yeah, Michael, I waited since 2010 to reread Wave Kings till this year, and now I'm finally reading Words of Radiance for the first time.
That's going to be interesting for you, I assume.
Yeah.
He definitely added so much that I was intrigued, and I wanted to know what all of that meant, but it took a while to get there. But yeah, if you're going to have a 10-book long series and your first book is 1,000 pages, you're not going to have all the answers in part 1.
I think that just might be my preferred method of learning magic, because I almost, if it's in the first like few chapters and they just dump all the info on you, I feel like I'm having to learn and study and like read a textbook about it, and then my brain gets overwhelmed. So I kind of like getting the tidbits here and there. But it does take a while. I definitely see that.
Yeah, I'm a huge Malazan fan, so I'm all about just trying to figure your way through a world. Like I think it gives that's some trust that the author's given to you to go, I know my readers are smart. They'll get there, right?
Now, since we're talking about the world, how did you guys like the world building that he does here? Because I think that's something that he's pretty well known for.
If I can go first, if that's okay. I thought this world was probably one of his most interesting yet. Other of his books are very exotic and very vibrant, but this world is even more extremely dull in the sense that there's no plants, there's no animal or only little animal life because the whole land is tormented by these gigantic winds or storms or whatever they are. We might learn about them in the future, but so it's a very dull world, I could say. People are a bit offended by the idea of chickens and idea of grass in this world. So I think that really provides an interesting backbone for the story because it's the opposite of our world. So I found that part of the world building, the natural version, I found really interesting. I still want to know much more about the why are these storms? Where do they come from? What are they actually? I want to learn more about that, and I think that he gave us enough teasers in this world to make us wonder about the mystery in the next books. So that part I really enjoyed, and the way the Spren are combined into the story, I really love as well. If that can be counted as part of the world, because there seems to be a Spren for about any feeling, emotion, or event that the world has. So I also want to know more about that, and I thought that these Spren were a really fun comedic relief throughout the story. They popped up at moments when stuff got really rough, and then they made it a little bit brighter. So yeah.
I agree with Hans, and I also agree with Amy because there's like history within like the book because there's scholars and stuff, and we get to learn about the history. And then having Shallan go from like a bow and travel like what it seems for a while, like the scope of this world is humongous. Like I'm like thinking, well, when I see it in my head, I think of like a huge like basically like our world, but like kind of more fantastical in a way. But yeah, it feels super super big, and I've never read a book where the world is that big. I don't know about you guys. This is like the first time where I read something where I'm like, man, this scope feels humongous.
Yeah,
I agree.
definitely.
Mhm.
I do think that sometimes I had small issues with the world building because it felt like it wasn't really backed up with a lot of examples. Like sometimes it felt like we just added stuff to make it feel very diverse and very rich, but it was already rich in itself. Like what Hans said with the high storms and with the animals and the natural landscape, I really liked that. But then you had certain times when he just talked about the type of people, and he was like, "Well, they have blue nails, or these people have like arteries that are very superficial," but it didn't really added anything to the story. So I was like, well, if it doesn't really bring anything more, maybe take it out and make it less convoluted because the world in itself is already rich enough for me.
I completely agree with that. I think that it was more of a visual world building in the actual physical world than it was the cultures, which I kind of am okay with that happening later in the series, but I definitely felt that that was a little bit lacking. But I loved the physical world. I thought it was like, it felt very vivid and just very atmospheric. And because we had that scene, kind of without going into spoilers, where we get to see the storm in action and see how powerful they can get, it felt very like I could imagine it all and I could see it, and I could also all the like different plants like we talked about that are their version of plants and that kind of retreat or seek water. I thought that that was all stuff that I could visually and vividly picture in my mind, and really liked that.
Absolutely, that and I think especially for the Shattered Plains, we get a really good idea of like what that looks like, right? Like it was pretty stark in my mind. Like I know the Shattered Plains. This place is insane. It is stark and there isn't much going on there. I did feel like I wanted more from like what's going on at Carbranth, right? Like I feel like Shallan was so into her little like kind of world that you didn't really get to see much there. You talked a lot about Alethkar, and there wasn't like a ton of like, well, what does it look like? Where is it going? I do, I'm excited to learn more. I just feel like there wasn't really enough time, which is funny in a 1,000-page book to like get into what all the rest of everything is, which is why I think he did those like interludes to be like, hey, also this other thing is way over here and happening on this other side of the world. So Anyway,
And it's also really politically heavy. Like I've never like thought the Way of Kings would be like this, like political heavy, especially because one of the characters is so entwined into it. So I feel like Sanderson did a good job of spreading his POVs around. We have like someone as Kaladin, then we have a scholar, where we learn the history, and then we have the political figure, which is pretty cool in my opinion.
And I'm so excited for them to start crossing over. We got like a little bit of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's going to be the most fun for the next book, where it's like we can finally see them interact. But I'm looking forward to it.
That was what I wanted to happen from the start. I was thinking like, okay, Kaladin and Dalinar need to get together because these two characters are going to have such a nice atmosphere and tension between them. I think that they're almost like different sides of the same coin. And Kaladin really dislikes Light Eyes in general, but that's because he's been let down so many times. While Dalinar is really what he thought Light Eyes should be. So I'm definitely looking forward to that in book 2.
Yeah, and it's funny because they like at least right now where we're at, it's like, ooh, they're not friendly, right? You know, they're at each other, but it is, you're like, but you guys are perfect for each other.
Exactly.
I'm excited to see with Kaladin and Adolin kind of where that tension and will they grow to like respect each other.
Yeah.
I think their personalities can kind of end up being almost like rivals and then friends.
Yeah, one is the biological son, and one is the sort of adopted son of Dalinar. So it's going to be interesting. But I think the fact that they gave them time away from each other gave them time to develop their own, and then in the next we can sort of see them cross over.
Did all of you like Dalinar from the start, by the way? Or was I the only one who really disliked him?
I liked him.
At the beginning, I wasn't sure, but I wasn't really like a fan, I would say, or like fond of him. I was like more like, I'm gonna sound repetitive, but I was like, give me more Kaladin. But yeah, Dalinar was just like, no, it's just like, I actually liked Shallan a little bit more than Dalinar at the beginning, but then yeah, Shallan was just like,
I feel you. That was my first read. On Shallan. I was like, let's just get through this.
Yeah, I think I'm not the one that prefers the political stories. I tend to sort of lose my mind in the political stories in fantasies because I do not understand the world. I only understand the political situations of our world, let alone the political situations of a fictional world. So sometimes I wish it would go a little bit faster because they were just politically and diplomatically talking around a conversation that could be ended in 2 sentences if they didn't need to be diplomatic about it. But I started to like him. He reminded me of another character in another book that I read, but I liked him more and more as he grew to be mistrusted by everyone around him. I grew to love him even more.
I forgot that he was gonna be like I don't know, like that noble that everyone likes and he's like so respected. But then once you start to see that he's not gonna be your typical like, you know, trope where he's like the main boss or whatever, you're like, oh, okay, I can chill with this guy.
See, I like heroic characters and justice kind of led characters, and I'm less into the morally gray characters. So for me, like, immediately clicked with Kaladin and Dalinar because I felt like they were both very much like good people and wanting to do right in the world, and everyone else around them wasn't letting them or wasn't doing the same. So I liked both from the beginning. But I think toward the end, actually, my favorites are Kaladin and Adolin. So I'm excited to see. I still love like Dalinar really high up though. And Shallan just annoyed me a lot.
You know what was funny about Dalinar was that when they started talking about the clothing.
Yeah.
Because like everybody dressed like so fashionably, like I don't know, suitable to the place, and I was like, what? And then I can just imagine Dalinar, like I see the artwork for him where his like with his suit and stuff, and I was like, isn't it everyone supposed to dress like that? But I guess they would wear like the most. I can just imagine like some of the stuff that we wear here, and it's just like, oh,
at wars,
yeah.
Yeah, he would just wear like the military. He just was like, because you got to show that you're the military, that you're there, you could be trusted. But yeah, I have a hard time separating, my first read from this read because I knew that I liked him from before, and so getting into it was like, at least eventually I liked him. I guess the question is, when are you talking about? When he first appears, when he's a drunkard at the at that first scene in the prelude? No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's just an interesting like how he went from like a complete 180 to this like whatever, and then all of a sudden, oh man, my king literally died, and I was the reason for it, and it like really got him completely down this other path. I like that because it's hard. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to like be making the right choices, and that felt like that was his rock bottom, and it completely changed his whole perspective, and I really respect that because it just in my line of work, what I deal with is there are so many just drug addicts and addictions out there that, and I'm sorry I always get personal here, but it's like the people, like, because I feel like you can't just like, oh well, there's a drug addict, you're a drug addict forever. There are seriously a lot of people that are able to change it around, and I have just the most respect for them. They're they are stellar people that can do that. And again, just that I like that character where he does this 180, changes his whole life, and even again, like everyone just said, becomes the guy that people are like, you're weird and I don't like it. And again, I think it even like more shines a light on the fact that this society's gotten corrupt. It is corrupt.
Yeah.
They're just right and wrong doesn't matter. All they care about is like getting their money from the what is it, the hearts, exactly. So you could just tell it's like they've completely lost it. But I do love the politics in this because you're just like the Parshendi, they owned up to this like right away. Why did they do that? What is going on? They knew it was going to create war, and they did it anyway. So I just love how much is going on there.
Yeah, that's a big mystery, how that beginning, what the whole meaning and like what the intent was behind it. I'm really curious to see. Like, to find out.
Isn't it kind of like funny how like the Parshendi are supposed to be like the people that are like they're fighting and we're supposed to maybe not like, but we didn't really get much of them, and we're starting to not like people within the community that is supposed to be the good guys, and it's like, oh, okay.
Ooh, this is actually an interesting question.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about this? I had some pretty strong feelings about this.
I'm a bit conflicted about it because Jasna was one of these characters I didn't was one of my least favorite, but I think we were meant to don't like her because she's really cold and blooded. She's a scholar in the way that her emotions have been become suppressed, and her brain, her logic side has sort of taken over. So I can understand her ethics. She seems to do justice like a vigilante would, but I don't think you should kill someone just because they're bad. But I also understand why she did it, but I don't agree with it. So I think it creates this complex feeling around it, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that's why they were put in the book, because Shallan actually has to think about this situation in the same way. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really liking what Jeroen says here as well. Like, if she just killed one, would it have the same result? But at the same time, I'm thinking you don't know that for sure. And of course, this is a fantasy world. I don't know what would happen if she didn't kill them. Would they go to prison, or would they just remain free and roaming the streets? Because then I'm thinking, like, killing 4 people who are bad and who are going to like cause a lot more trouble is probably the better deal than just letting them kill innocents. But of course, she did bait them.
Yeah. See, it's a hard one. I think he was going for like, he's like, I'm not here to tell you what's right. I'm just here to like mess with your head. That's what I like that. That's where Sanderson's at. But like, so one of the things that drives me nuts in fiction in all kinds of, and even in the real world, I guess, but is this whole like someone kidnaps you and I'm going to kill your brother, sister, child, whatever, if you don't do this. And so it's on your head. It's like, no. It's on the person doing the murdering's head. Like, and I feel like this has a little bit of that, like, justice is important. There's a reason we have the rule of law. I am a lawyer, so I obviously go down this road, but just to do that outright, where's your evidence? That's where I'm coming from, is like, where's your evidence and your even authority to do that? And I guess she's in the royal line or whatever, maybe they do have the authority, but that one's a struggle. But I definitely, it made her a definite, like, interesting character that I want to watch. I do like her, though. That's the other thing, is despite that, it's almost like despite that I like her. That's where I guess I can leave it.
Well, I'm gonna change my answer now that I know Bryce is a lawyer. So
everything you say can and will be held against you.
I just had a lot of questions. I think kind of like you, Yolene, where I was like, does she know that it was the same people that had been causing the crimes already mentioned before? Was there a chance to put them in prison instead of killing them? And also kind of, I liked the discussion of what were her motives, because even if killing them might be the kind of right justice thing to do, is she doing it because it makes, like, she likes killing? That's all of a sudden a big problem then. Or is she doing it to teach Shallan a lesson, which I also think, like, can you take a life just to teach someone a lesson and prove a point? I have more of an issue with that. Is she doing it because she genuinely believes these are, people that are going to cause harm? I almost feel like, even though the result is the same, her motive and her kind of if she took joy from it mattered to me a lot too. And the evidence of are these people that have been causing the crimes.
Yeah.
I also really like what Lila is saying here, because I was thinking, while Bryce was also talking about responsibility and stuff like that, there is a story that I think one of the side characters is telling Kaladin about this. It's people, and when somebody does something wrong, and it can be like a very small mistake, will kill them, because the emperor does not. I don't know what they said exactly.
I remember that.
At the very least, they're like putting the responsibility in the emperor's hands, and then they realize that the emperor has been dead for tens of years, maybe. So now all of a sudden they feel guilty, but in reality, they've done it. It was them all along, but now they just don't have anyone else to blame. So it does feel like Sanderson is putting these small little snippets in here to talk about responsibility and blame and what is right and wrong. And I do really like that.
That was a really interesting story. I like that.
And like, I mean, just along that line, under the law, at least in the US, it's, you could, like, if someone's like gun to your head, you have to do something bad, right? You can be forgiven for, like, theft. You can be forgiven for whatever. But if it's you have to kill somebody, then you will then still be guilty for that, right? Yeah. So I think that's important, because, and that's a good point, is like, no, if someone's going to die, it's apparently going to be you in that situation, but you can't just go take a life because someone's threatening you.
Are we okay to skirt kind of, are we talking spoilers? Is that okay?
Yeah, okay, so everybody know we're talking spoilers.
Like with Seth, I think too, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I feel like I don't know what the background is of his culture and his being a truthman or whatever that phrase is.
Yeah.
I don't know what the background of that is, but he uses that to excuse a lot. He's like, that I just have to kill. I do whatever my master tells me. And I think that also, like, I feel for him, and I'm sad at the progression that it takes when he gets that really awful, owner, and then, like, he's sent on all these really awful jobs. But at the end, maybe that story that you were talking about, Yolene, that, like, Tower and Ember is showing that, he's just as guilty, which I believe. Regardless of it.
Yeah. Is his honor worth those killings? Like, to me, no.
And it's interesting that, almost talking about Bryce, your kind of lawyer aspect of you can't, if you're a gun to your head, you can't kill someone else because that's still not excused. His whole thing is he can't kill himself. So it's almost like he can't take his own life, but he's acceptably allowed to take lots of other lives. And it's a reversal. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he is shocked to find that others misuse him for it sometimes, especially at the post-credit stinger, if I can call it that, with the leader of Carburant being
Oh, yeah.
corrupt at himself as well. I was like, whoa. But
Mhm.
the fact that he was shocked that such a good person was using him was really complex and weird as well, because he seems to be killing everyone. So why is it weird that this person is using you, for example?
Mhm.
He's the only other character that we got a lot of POV from, huh?
Just the interludes, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he never tries to like take her, at least that I saw. I forget if it's a ring or a stone or what his like
Yeah.
is, but he never tries to like take it back or do anything to escape.
I first thought that he was really compelled, that he didn't have a choice. When somebody has a stone, he just needs to do it. But then, as the story progressed, it was like, no, it's just your honor that you're protecting, which
Yeah.
needs to be a little bit iffy. Like, you can just walk away, nothing is going to happen.
Well, I'm almost waiting for there to be more of an explanation to that like
Yeah.
title.
Mhm. Yeah, we need some more about him as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Because he starts off the book, and then he starts it off with a banger because he just took out the king. And it's like, and then also it's Dalinar's brother, correct? Or am I wrong? Is it?
Yeah.
And then,
Because yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. And then now the nephew's the king, and I really dislike the new one. Like he's so like, I know he's scared because he thinks he's gonna get killed, but it's like it gets overwhelming of like him saying, "Oh, they're under here, they're over there," and I'm like, "Bro, you're not gonna get killed. Like, chill." I mean, I don't know he's gonna get killed, but it's
Yeah, but-
annoying. It's like, bro,
That's
stop.
that's what makes the Dalinar scene at the end so good. He's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the biggest plot twist for me, honestly.
Yeah.
I kind of predicted some of these stuff about like the Parshendi and the Parshmen, but I was really shocked when it was actually the like king that had set up the whole saddle situation in the
Yeah.
first place. I had not
Yeah.
expected that.
Oh, that's the other thing that's so cool. How like the Parshendi are like singing to each other. It's like I've never seen that anywhere else, where like they can communicate with song and like with whatever they're singing, it's like their mood. And it's like I know a lot of people like music, so I feel like this would resonate with them. Where like if they're mad, they're gonna be like, I can just imagine them singing like AC/DC or something. And then when
Those about to rock.
Thunderstruck with the high storm in the background.
I know.
And they
Oh,
had
man.
that weird like honor moment with Dalinar at the end too, or
Yeah.
I think it was with Dalinar where they nodded at each other. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to them too that I'm
Yeah.
curious about.
Yeah, and I think this harbours back to the point we made about cultures. We don't really know anything about the Pashandi other than we hate them. But the fact that we now learn that the Parshmen may be the Voidbringers in hiding, maybe, question mark. But also they got so much culture behind them. We know now that they are mostly appearing in pairs of perhaps even a married couple of a man and a woman who look the same, choosing to fight together. We know that they sing. We know that they have honor. We know that they won't kill someone just to track them down, and they respect Kalina rescuing Dalinar, and they don't come after them. So we know a lot of humanizing elements to them now. So I wonder if that changes our opinion on them in the future. I assume we will come to love them, but it's
Right.
interesting to me how they get more humanized as the story comes along.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they gave more humanized than the actual humans in the story because like they respect their dead more than the humans do. And I was
Yeah.
like, man,
Yeah.
that's respect right there. Like they literally respect their dead so much, and it's like when they're like scavenging for stuff, and then they have the parchment there, and he's like, I'm not doing that, and he literally wants to fight them off because he's like, what are you guys doing to my people? It's like, and he knows he's going up against like a whole squadron of people, and he doesn't care. It's like, bro, that's respect right there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm so sorry. I got to get off here and go pick up girls from soccer. So thank you guys so much. I'm sorry to interrupt it.
Good chatting.
I'm sorry to be here so quickly.
It's really nice hearing your thoughts. So
Yeah.
Yeah, nice hearing you.
hopefully till next time.
Yeah, exactly. Next time I'll
Next
plan
time.
better. All right, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye. So now we were talking because Maza said like they respect their dead, and I was thinking about Thaddeus, who doesn't even respect the living, like how he
Oh,
uses
yeah.
Richmond, and it's like on paper and in theory, yes, it's a good strategy, but you are using humans who are alive and
Yeah.
they're on your side. So maybe that was also like a way to tell you Zedeas is not to be trusted.
Yeah.
But I was not in on it. I really thought that Zedeas was
No,
to be trusted.
I was backstabbed as well. I'm naturally someone who trusts people and books, and then haha backstab. So yeah,
Mhm.
he
It was
crosses all the ethical
so well
borders, and
done
we still
too.
like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like I
feel like
feel
if
like they kind of build it up where you don't trust him at first, and then he has that moment where he actually like talks to Dalinar. He's like, "Okay, tell me, friend, tell me. Like I'm trying to understand." And after he's saved, and then you want to trust him, and then then you're backstabbed. Yeah, I also I feel like I should have missed like I should have seen the hint of he doesn't care about Bridgman as a like reveal. But yeah, I missed that completely. I was so annoyed that he did that.
Exactly. But at the same time, I was almost happy that he betrayed Dalinar because I could see Kaladin sitting there. I was like, yes, 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 now it's going to happen. He's going
Oh,
to
yeah.
turn the thing around and they're going to get
I'm
together. And
so
finally,
mad he has that what are they called? The
The sword.
Blade? Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
mad he has that though.
yes.
I'm like
That
That was
everything else was fine, but that I'm annoyed that he now has it.
yeah. It was like he chose to use the wrong means, but he still won in the end somehow.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the things that I don't like about Dalinar. He fights fair, but you can't fight fair against somebody who doesn't
Yeah.
do that. Because then
Yeah.
you're always going to lose. So please put honor aside. Sometimes when you're fighting against dishonorable men, you're allowed to also fight dirty. But that's why I also like that towards the end, he was finally realizing I need to do something else because this isn't working. And throughout the entire story, it was so frustrating. And I could definitely understand Adeline because he also was angry with his father at times. And I was, yes, I understand you. Please step down, Dalinar. But now he's back. So I'm excited to see what he does in book 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically he just bought the whole bridge crew for like a whole shark play, and it's like, bro, what?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really sweet. And I thought that was such a gesture, but also it was just I'm so mad that Sidious has it now. But
Yeah.
it was I think that was like the first step toward Kaladin trusting him though, so I get the intent behind it.
I really like Sil. And at the start, you can definitely see that she's more than just this friend that she thinks she is because she starts having memory and stuff like that. But I just thought that she was something extremely special. And in the end, it does turn out that she is. But it seems like Kaladin also has that effect on her. So it's like a back and forth between the two of them. But I liked her as a character. And I do think that sometimes she was just funny. And this is probably one of Brandon Sanderson's books or series that I think is the most adult. It has some dark moments and it does go explicit at times. So then also having these lighter snippets in between of Syl and Kaladin and Syl and Rock, because Rock can see her from the start. I did really like that.
Yeah.
You know something else that? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna mention like something else that Brandon Sanderson did that was really smart was making giving the background for Kaladin to be a surgeon because he's gonna need that a lot because he's a fighter. So giving that like the whole surgeon background is really smart on his part because if he would have just came out the cuts and Kaladin would have been able to do all this, you would have been like, wait, how does he know how to do all that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and touching about Syl, I really love her as well. She sort of starts out as a simple friend, but then grows more and more. And I do have a theory about who she could be, but yeah, I don't know if we're sharing theories here. But
You're
yeah.
allowed to share theories, Tom.
Okay, so my wild theory right now is that Dalinar has forgotten his wife, probably because he has used that lake that is included in one of the interludes where you have to give something away to get something. And he has forgotten his wife clearly because of that, but he doesn't want to speak with her. And I maybe have an inkling that this character is the forgotten wife that maybe is coming back somehow, but that's a wild theory. I don't know if that's going to be the case. But I really love how she grew from a simple sprite to something that's more than a sprite. So that gave me also the idea that she could be something else.
I was undecided about her. I don't know if I feel like she has enough development. Like I like her, but I also feel like she's a little bit one level for me. So I'm excited to see more of her and hopefully get more attached. But if it was something to do with the wife, that would be cool. That would be interesting. There'd be a lot of, I feel like, emotion tied to it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, I think Hans must have seen like the leaks of like Brandon Sanderson's notes or something, because that sounds like on point. Like I feel like that could be a theory that actually plans out and like happens. But I feel like she is very I don't know, because I know some of the bridge crew can see her, but others can't. So I wonder what distinguishes you from being able to see her. Like I wonder if you have to be like noble or something for you to be able to see like the Sill, because I feel like only the people that have seen her so far are people that are like pure-hearted kind of way. But even though Callanan is like, because Callanan is pure-hearted, but he's also very stubborn and like I don't know, he's kind of grimy too.
I want to say like person of faith, but he's not really a person of faith, so I don't know. But that was my assumption, is that like people who believed in these kind of spirits could see them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also don't know if she can choose it herself, because I think in the start she's like not really developed, and then at times she almost seems like a child that's learning stuff. Because then she asks like, "How can you lie? And why is it sometimes good to lie and sometimes not?" And so she asks all of these questions, but now she starts remembering it. So it seems like she's more and more developed. And then towards the end, when the bridge crew is trying to learn how to use the spear, she makes herself visible, I think, to some of the other people. Like you have Lopen with one arm,
Mhm.
who's trying
Yeah.
to also find those gems. And I think that then Lopen can actually see her. I'm not quite sure, but that would definitely mean that she's developing into a stronger Span, probably because she's close to
Mhm.
Callus.
Yeah.
I wrote down a quote about her that I thought was interesting, because not quotes, just like comments I wrote down about her when I was annotating, that there's like it shows that she has a radiant blade at one point. She's like on his chest defending Kaladin, and it says she has like a radiant blade. Those are the words used. But then also, toward the end, she says that shard blades feel wrong to her, and that she's like happy that Sadius has it, and that Dalinar gave it away. And so I was like, maybe it has something to do with the sickness that Dalinar feels when he fights.
Oh,
Or maybe she's like a radiant because radiant blades. I don't know. Those were my like offshoot theories just based on
Yeah, and we don't know what kind of sprint she is, so it could be definitely the case that she's tied to that also somehow.
I think she said Honor's friend toward the end, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So it's like we don't know enough about the Spren in general that we can make a full idea on Sil herself yet. So could go all the way.
How did you guys picture the Spren? Like I just picture them like a little different type of glow coming out of them. Like how did you guys picture it in your head?
Yeah, I also saw them as a glow, and then when they, especially Syl, when she further developed, I did see her like as a sort of human shape, but not as well developed as Tinkerbell, for example. But that was the type of character that I was comparing her to the entire time. So it's actually funny that Hyla mentioned that.
Don't you think sometimes like this when he mentions this brand, like for example, I'm trying to think of a good example here where like they say that they saw a sprint coming out of them. I feel like wouldn't it give away some stuff away from like the character? Like if he's trying to hide something, but a specific sprint spurs out, wouldn't that kind of like give away what he's saying?
Yeah, but then sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes there's more of them. Like they gather to feel like, because there's like fear ones, right, and also glory ones. But then you have to really be feeling it to have those, because otherwise you'd have fear ones all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of see her as like either, I'm not very visual reader, so like I saw her as like light, but also wind, because she's a wind sprint at first, and so I was like imagining not like leaves, but like some sort of airy shape.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a very visual thinker, so I had almost a different image for each of the Spren. So each Spren had a different color or image in my head. I pictured Syl to be kind of like Navi from Zelda Ocarina of Time. I don't know if you played the game, but it's like just a little ball of light with two wings. So I pictured her more like that in the beginning, but then later she began to become almost like a ghost woman of some sorts, like a transparent woman in the end. So
I think I spoiled myself with like the artwork from like the I think I spoiled myself with the artwork that I see all over like the internet and on Twitter, like where they draw like Dalinar and like Kaladin and then the Spran and everything. So I feel like I kind of ruined myself because now whenever I read it, that's the first thing that comes to my head.
Yeah. Hey, listen. Yes, exactly, Amy.
Now, I was also just wondering what some of your favorite moments were, because there were definitely some twists and turns, and I'm always the worst at seeing those coming. So I had a couple of moments that I like had to put the book down because I just wasn't expecting it at all. Was wondering if you had the same thing or if you saw it all coming.
For me, some of the big plot twists were my favorite moments, like Sadea's backstabbing, and then Kaladin rescuing Dalinar. So those were some of my favorites. But I also really love the Bex lore stories of Kaladin as a child, especially the ones with his little brother. And then I really, because opposite to you guys, I really loved Shallan. But I'm a person who really loves to learn about lore and backstory, so I tend to like the characters that are behind the same goal. So her last scenes in the book made me love her character very much. So I think those were some of my favorite parts as well. That these somehow loose parts that we had from Shallan's story, that they became like one completed whole that's very much connected to the other characters. We just didn't see it yet. So yeah, those are some of my favorites, along with some others that have been mentioned along the way so far.
Yeah, same here. But I feel like one of my favorite moments from the whole book was when they're training, like when Kaladin's training with his whole crew, and then they actually put it into like play, and they actually survive. Like no one dies because their training pulls out because they're able to flip the bridge different ways and stuff. But then you Kaladin realizes that
Yeah.
the other bridge crews are dying, so he's kind of like I like the moment where he's stuck in his head and he's like, I did right, but at the same time I'm also doing wrong. And he's also like saying, oh, we're gonna lose the war or like the battle because of me. And his whole like perspective goes back to when he was in like those battles and he was one of the people fighting. It's like, am I really doing right here just by protecting like my crew? But in my head I was like, yes, you're doing right because they're taking you guys to the slaughter. So I don't know. I really like that moment where he's stuck in his head and he's like, what did I just do? Did I do right or did I do wrong?
That was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised by the plot twists that Hans mentioned with Sadius and then, or Sadius, however you say it. I wasn't as surprised by the like Parshendi twist. I kind of saw that coming because I feel like it was so, they were very obviously stated as like, they don't make any, they're always so like, so servitude and they don't, stand up or say any no to anything. It felt too perfect and said too often. But I really liked the mental health. So I liked the flashbacks with his brother, but I thought that the flashbacks with his father could have been condensed. We didn't really need that. I didn't need as many of them with him deciding surgeon, not surgeon, surgeon, not surgeon. I like that could have been done effectively in one. But with his brother, I liked that. And then I also liked I liked his depression representation. I thought that was one of the most, I know this book and the series are really like claimed for it or like really, I guess, like applauded for it. Because I know a lot of people think also that it feels very accurate, and I've had depression myself, and I feel like I've never seen it portrayed in a way of like a storm cloud coming on you and then going away, and like things just nothing specific affecting you, but all of a sudden you're depressed, and then someone gives you something, or someone you are close with, like his brother, like manages to pull him out of it. I felt like that was so accurate, so I liked those, and then I really liked Dalinar and Aelin's father-son scenes together. I thought that they had a really lovely dynamic and just so much respect. And I feel like we don't see that often. Usually it's like the rebellious son and kind of going against everything the father. And I loved the respect and the kind of work that they put in together, and his brother as well too. I liked their whole family and kind of the way they worked in battle. I liked the fight with the king when they kind of had that first big, I forget what the creature is called, but that when they were like,
oh yeah,
they were trying to defeat that creature and the saddle thing happened. I liked that whole battle and how Dalinar kind of comes out and, defends him. And I thought that was really, really exciting. And then I liked Kaladin's like strategies too, and trying to figure out how to keep his men alive without affecting the bigger battle, and also kind of being constantly knocked down and getting back up. I liked that dynamic a lot.
I
Yeah,
really
it was.
hope that Kaladin isn't like Robin Hobb's fits, because if he is, I'm gonna be very, very disappointed, just because my man has gone through so much in just the first book. So like if he puts him on through more stuff later on in the series, I'm only in the second book. So if he puts him on through more stuff, I'm gonna be like, no man, like Kaladin deserves better than this.
Yeah. I think the points that you discussed, Maria, were definitely parts that I think this makes a more modern fantasy, in that it has mental health. It shows that stuff isn't really binary in the sense that it's good or evil, but there's a lot of gray mass in between, and that we get to explore those parts. That's interesting to me.
It does feel more modern, definitely.
Yeah.
By the way, hi Stacy, welcome. We were just talking about just in general how you like the book, because I think for you it's a reread, and what some of our favorite themes are.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm sorry. I miscalculated the time zones, and I thought this started at 11 for me. So I'm an hour late. I got on here, and you guys are all talking. I'm like, why is it already said live for 55 minutes?
Never too late.
So I'm going to
Fashionably
have to go
late.
back and watch this stream on YouTube later so I can see what you guys all said. But yes, this was a reread for me because I only made it through Oathbringer. And so before we move on to Rhythm of War, I need to reread it because I can't. It's so much happens. And having read Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, I can definitely tell you there's a lot of things that you need to remember from each book. So it's one of those that benefits you for reading it back to back. But
Okay, that's good to know.
yeah. To be honest with you, in my opinion, I think that Way of Kings is probably the first epic fantasy that I ever read besides Lord of the Rings. So most of I wouldn't say that Brandon Sanderson's previous works are really considered epic fantasy, especially compared to this. I hadn't read Wheel of Time. I hadn't read Malazan, which is where we're reading that right now. So this was my very first experience with epic fantasy. And if this hadn't been my first experience, I don't think I would ever have gotten into it. Brandon Sanderson has a way of writing things that is so easy to absorb. You can visualize everything. The concepts, even though his magic systems are hard magic systems and they have a lot of rules, it's easy for you to understand what's happening. He does a great job with explaining those things without telling you. And so that's the reason why I love Stormlight Archive, and it only gets better from here. I do still think that Way of Kings was my favorite just because it was my first experience with a world so big and so rich with life. I mean, there's not, other than humans, there's not a whole lot in this world that is similar to our own. And I don't know if you guys all read the physical book, but all the pictures and illustrations that are in there and all that stuff, I love that part. So I don't want to go, you guys talked about a lot of things, and I don't want to go over things that you already talked about. I'll catch up with you guys on the next video, but I will definitely watch to see what you thought, because I loved this book. This is my third time rereading it.
Oh.
So, because I reread it before Oathbringer, also because when I started Way of Kings, the second book was already out, so I read those back to back, and then I had to wait for Oathbringer, and then I had to wait for Rhythm of War. So, and I don't normally reread books, but it's just something about these worlds, and every time you reread it, you pick up on things that you didn't catch the first time around. So.
I feel like these are more reread commitments than anything else because of how long they are. So I'm always impressed by people who come back to it.
Exactly. The audiobooks are excellent. So I reread through the audiobook. I didn't actually read it at all physically this time. I listened to it 100%. And the narrators that narrate these books are excellent. They're a husband and wife team. I don't know if you guys already talked about that, but they are very good audiobooks. I highly recommend those to anybody who is nervous about getting into it because it's so big. They read really fast in the audiobooks.
I actually like audiobooks that actually have like the voice changer where it's like a boy and then the girl type of thing, because it gives it more of a feel. So like, yeah, I listened to the audiobook for The Way of Kings the second time as well when I was like doing stuff, and I was like, what can I be doing when I'm like washing the dishes? I put the audiobook on because I was like, I can be listening to a book right now instead of just standing here. But yeah, they do a really good job, and it feels like so vibrant when they're reading it, especially like Dalinar. I feel like the Dalinar voice is like the best voice in the audiobook, in my opinion, even though I like Callan's POV better.
Some people in the chat are talking about witch like Hoyt. I think if you read some other books in the store in the Cosmere, you definitely recognize the name Hoyt. But yeah, I really like this character, and he actually reminded me of the Fool in
Yeah.
the Realm of the Elderlings. So I immediately thought, like, okay, there's going to be more to him, just because I know that type of character, and there's more than meets the eye. So yeah, I really like him as well, even though I think if I met him in real life, I would be extremely annoyed because I would hate people who talk like that in riddles the entire time. But as a character, he's interesting.
Yolene, you might be mad at me for saying this, but I think wit is like what I wanted the Fool and Robin Hood to be. To be fair, I'm only up to Assassin's Quest, and he's not at real. I mean, Live Ship is a separate thing, so I feel like what I haven't gotten to the best parts of the Fool probably, but I feel like the wit is more witty than the Fool is, and I feel like the Fool's more nonsensical in Robin Hood, and I wanted more of the like wit that the wit has. And then I also feel like he's more in the wit in Sanderson is more involved in events and knows more, whereas the Fool in Hobb, for me, I'm like, are they just, is the wit just kind of is the Fool just observing? Like, are they actively? I feel like I don't know the role that the Fool plays yet, so I feel like they do seem very comparable, but I liked this iteration more just from where I'm at currently.
Yeah, I'm not going to do spoilers, but I'm just going to say, like, you're going to see more of it.
Okay.
I have this is my sixth Sanderson book, and I had to read on Reddit what Hoyt/Wit actually is in the other books. Like he was, not to go into spoilers, but he was a merchant in one book that gave one line, and I was like, oh, I didn't catch that at all. So for me, this seemed like a totally new character, even though I've apparently seen him 4 or 5 times already so far. But yeah, I really like him. He's like all-knowing, but he's also the court jester. So it's like a very big duality between two factions of this character that I was like, oh, okay. So I'm interested to see more of him. I don't have enough of opinion about him yet because we don't have as much information yet.
I think he's going to be
kind of
Brandon
imagine-
Sanderson's wit. I mean, not wit, his Easter egg throughout the series, I think. Sorry, Stacey, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say, I kind of imagine him as like Doctor Who visiting all these different universes and times. But instead of it being in his point of view, it's all everybody else's point of view. He just kind of drops in here and there, says witty things, and then he disappears from the story.
That's how I'm going to picture it now.
Yeah. And apparently a large part of the I read this just before we went live. Apparently a large part of the sort of introductory bits to each chapter, the ones in italics, apparently are a letter from a wit to someone else.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, they totally didn't give us this information, but they, in the article I can send it later. They put all the introductory bits like one big wall of text, and then it made sense that it was just a letter. So I
Maybe
really
I
love
should
that
read them
perspective.
again. Just one after
I
another.
know. Now I'm going to have to go back and read them all.
Not all of them, but apparently the ones in the middle section.
Okay, that makes sense. I thought the ones toward the end were like Yasna's writings and herself.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, makes sense.
But the ones, yeah.
Did you get the Kickstarter, Stacey?
I sure did.
I really did.
I am a Sanderson fan. I have not read everything he's written, but I own it. If you include the Kickstarter, technically I own those too.
Which one did you get? The physical books or?
No, I got the ebooks. I can't afford the physical books. $50 a pop.
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
It's crazy how fast they like flew, and he made so much money. That's crazy. So there's a lot of fans out there, like a lot. I wouldn't consider myself a fan yet, just because I'm only into like the second book, so it's like I call myself a fan yet. Like if Stephen King would have done a Kickstarter like that, I would have bought like the top tier. But since he doesn't do that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lila here is comparing this one, well, at least the mental health aspect with Wheel of Time. Now, I'm going to come clean here. I did DNF the Wheel of Time after the fourth book. I can see the similarities, especially because Sanderson finished up the Wheel of Time. He was a big Robert Jordan fan, I think. And I almost felt like, especially in this series, I could see that he almost wrote it in the same way, with like every character that was introduced, you were going to know what type of clothing they were wearing and that it was like culturally appropriate or not and all of that stuff. So I thought like, oh yeah, here Robert Jordan has influenced his writing style. So I actually found that nice to see. But at the same time, I did the net Wheel of Time. So when I started seeing those similarities, I was like, is this going to be a bad sign, or am I actually going to like the book? And I also found like in the Wheel of Time books, the first half I was always bored, and then the second half was amazing. And that like that amazing ending that immediately wanted me to start the next book, and then that first half of the next book was always boring again. So it had like the same thing, that it ended with a big bang. So I do hope that the second book in Stormlight Archive is just like the second half of the first book of Way of Kings, but just the entire book, and not that the first half is going to be like a little bit just starting off
Yeah.
very.
If I can comment on that a little bit, to me, the Sanderson books are always the beginnings are really good and the endings are fantastic, and then there's a little bit of a lull in the middle, but not. I don't like long books, so I don't mind as much. But there's definitely a little bit of a hill on the in the beginning, and then a valley in the middle, and then a mountain on the end. So that's has tended to be the case for all of his books that I've read so far. So I assume the rest of his books are gonna follow his formula. I wouldn't call it a formula actually, but just his style of writing more so.
So one of the things that Sanderson is good at, but is not for all readers, is his extensive world building and extensive character building. So you as a reader know everything there possibly is to know about the world. You know what vegetation is growing in the area. You know what type of animals are there. What do they eat? You know, like you said, the clothing of the people, and you know the different classes and how they interact. I watched. Has his own YouTube channel, and I've watched several of them. And he talks about this, and he says, you know, if you're going to spend all this time creating something, you can't really ask the author, hey, can you just not put all of that in here? Because he's like, I created all this stuff. I want everybody to know this world that is in my head. This is my outlet, my where I'm putting everything. But I will have to say, if you're going to go about doing that, I think he does it in a good way. But yeah, it can tend to drag, especially if you're a reader that's just like, come on, get on with it.
Yeah. Now,
those are the things you forget first too, by the way.
Exactly. Now, this is probably not going to sound too good. I am going to say I did enjoy the book. It's not an all-time favorite or anything like that. But in general, I don't really like Brandon Sanderson's character work, especially for his secondary characters. And maybe that's because I do read a lot of books with morally gray characters who, for me, read a bit more realistic, maybe, or that's just the viewpoint that I have now. And there was like one scene between Rock and Theft, and Rock was telling how he became a bridgeman. And he said that he was a cook originally, so he had to cook for Sedeas, and he put dung in the food because he thought like, well, Sedeas is not going to notice it, and that way I can get back to him. And Theft was rolling on the floor laughing, and he almost fell off a cliff. And that immediately brings me out of the story, because I've never seen anyone in my life roll over the floor laughing, especially not if you're like in that situation and you're depressed and you're feeling down, and then something like that is being said, and that's so funny. It immediately takes me out of the story. That's like something that I see in an animation movie, but I don't see that in my adult fantasy. But at the same time, I can see that that's the sort of book that it is. And I think that Sanderson knows that that's not super realistic, but he just wants to have some uplifting moments as well. But it's just like the type of character work that I don't enjoy. And if then the story is also slow, that's what I'm starting to notice. And I'm starting to nitpick at it, like extremely. And then from the start of part 3, every chapter had something interesting happening. And then I start noticing more like the plot. And then I don't really care that maybe his character work isn't exactly to my liking. I also think that starting from part 3, it was better. And the secondary characters were a lot better. But yeah, I'm just not the biggest fan of those characters that feel pretty one dimensional for me.
I kind of
Okay.
excused his side characters in this one a little bit because even though we had 1,000 pages, we were so focused on like our 4 main perspectives that I thought they were really well developed. And I almost felt like he had to choose out of the bridge 4, he had to choose like 2 or 3 people that we would know and kind of feel like we had a bit more development with, which are like Rock and Heft, and then he would later on maybe give us more of that group and we would get to know them. But if he gave us like 10 people all at once and then some of them were dying off and like changing out, I feel like it would have been too much. So I was okay with that personally. But yeah, I can see what you're saying about kind of they do feel less developed than our main group. But I still stand by the fact that I think his female characters to me feel very, both Vin and Mistborn and Shallan in this to me just feel very almost like, I don't know if he sets them up to be seen as like they think too much of themselves is almost kind of how, at least with Shallan, like I feel like she says these things that are supposed, like the wit is witty. She says things that she thinks are bantery and funny, and they're not to me personally. So that for me was taking me out of the story a lot. Like her, it almost felt forced with her and her dialogue, and so those were where kind of I got pulled out. So for me, it was almost similar. It was opposite, I think, Yolene and you, where I was like, part 1 I really liked. Part 1 was with her, so I struggled. Part 2 I loved. Part 3 went down, and part 4 went back up because she was like in 1 and 2, 1 and 3.
That's so interesting of you to bring up, Jointly, because I feel like that I didn't think about that until now that you brought it up. Because the side characters, like you don't really see them much. Like you're like we said, they're focused on like the 4 main characters. And now I'm thinking back of other series that I've read, like A Song of Ice and Fire, that like has a character cast that's humongous. So I wonder how Brandon Sanderson would have done with like putting that much character work into his book. I wonder if it would have uplifted it, or we would have been like, bro, this is way too many characters. I know a lot of people say that about A Song of Ice and Fire, but I enjoy all those characters. Now that you brought up the side characters, it's like you're right. You basically are like tunnel vision into one character, and you see the world. Like the world is good. The side characters are just kind of like there. I feel like someone once mentioned the side characters felt like cardboard kind of thing. Like they're just like extras there. So it's like, oh, I didn't realize it until like now that you pointed it out.
And I think I could like forgive that if it was a 400 or 500 page book. But here I do think you had enough page time to like maybe flesh them out a little bit, and then maybe take just a couple of other things away, because some things are extremely fleshed out. Like Maria also mentioned, like the father-son dynamic between Kaladin and his father. It was really interesting to read about that. That those flashbacks I actually liked more than anything, to know more about Kaladin's life. And I do hope that we see more about Shallan in the next books that can then hopefully make me understand her better. But at the same time, a lot of those flashbacks with Kaladin could have been shortened. And then maybe use that time to flesh out some of those secondary characters more.
Yes, Amy, 100%.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And everybody humors them. Like Shallan makes jokes and they're not that funny. Okay, you might laugh like just politely, like haha, and then move on. But some of them really laugh like she's saying the funniest thing ever. I'm like, that's not true. Just sometimes you can tell her that she's not funny.
Yeah, I found it interesting because I totally read over it. I didn't even notice it. Not even till you mentioned it, I was like, oh, was that part of the story? Like, I don't mind it as much, but I like animation movies, so that's maybe why I like the humor as well. But yeah, I agree that the secondary characters in this story aren't. It's definitely like he has this theater lights on the characters that we want to follow, and then the other characters you can still see in the sort of semi shadow that's around the spotlight, but you don't see them fully. And it's funny because I normally enjoy secondary characters, and for example, in movies more than the primary characters. But in this story, I didn't mind as much that the secondary characters were on the second row of the story instead of sharing the foreground.
I was actually also wondering if any of you saw it coming that the priest with Shallan was going to be a poisoner.
But I do remember in our Discord talking about how it seemed to, like, there was something weird about it, because I was like, Yasna had also eaten the bread, and later on it made more sense. So that immediately, I almost felt like it took too long to have Shallan think of those questions, because it felt obvious to me right away that, like, this doesn't quite line up. But yeah, I didn't see that twist coming either.
No, I didn't see it. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I didn't see it coming at all, and I was really shocked because I don't know. I don't think about the story while I'm reading it. I'm just following along. So for me, it was a really big shock that this happened, and especially as I find the magic system. We haven't really talked about the magic system, but I find it very mysterious how the magic is in this story, and especially the magic that Jasna and Shallan have is to me the most mysterious part of the mysterious magic that we have. So because I didn't have the information, I didn't see it coming, because I didn't know it was possible to do such things with blood and with other kinds of food ingredients to make them better. So yeah.
I agree. And
It makes more sense
Emperor-
on second read.
Yeah, but I imagine you have that added information about the magic system that would maybe let you see it coming earlier.
Yeah, I'm curious.
It really gets
that other area.
so interesting in the next book. The magic system really expands, because I think the main thing is he wanted to keep the magic system kind of how it works secret, because you're in the point of view of Kaladin, who doesn't know anything about the magic system. And then it makes it more interesting as he starts to figure out he's got magic, right? So it's not until the second book that he starts exploring what his magic is. And you are introduced to other characters who understand the magic system even more. And actually, Amy says on here about the Emperor's mother being a character. She's actually the one that kind of explains to the reader how some of the magic works in this. And I love her character in the second book.
Do we get more like direct POVs from anyone else, or do we stay with those 4 POVs?
You stay at least for the first 3 books. You stay with those 4 POVs.
Yeah, but I heard that each book is sort of different spotlight on each character. Like we had flashbacks from Kaladin, so I heard that Shallan is the second book's focus. So it's going to be interesting to have that backstory for every one of these characters.
Yeah, I agree, because didn't Shallan say, like, towards the end of this book that she killed her father?
Yeah.
And maybe I missed it, but I didn't know that until that point. I just thought that he died.
I think it was a big reveal.
Yeah, they were acting like she was getting back the magic to pay off her father's debts, but then she killed off the dad, and now she wants to repay the mafia, so to speak, to get her name off the line. It's really weird and complex yet.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up. I was gonna bring up that point where, like, I at the beginning, I felt like Brandon Sanderson kind of wanted us to feel bad for her, kind of like, oh, she's doing this to, like, pay off the debt and, like, her family suffering and stuff. But it kind of seemed also like she came from, like, a good, like, upbringing. Like, it was like she was, like, always had everything she wanted, kind of thing. And then I never really felt bad for her. And then when they mentioned that, I was like, bro, like, what is Shallan? Like, what the heck?
I got the sense that, like, she was sheltered, but her brothers had an awful upbringing, and that maybe it either turned on her or she, like, killed him to defend her brothers, maybe, because that one interlude, I think it's the very first pair of interludes we get with the brother that's, like, pulling the legs off the crab. Yeah. It's really hard to read, and I hate it, but I hope we never go back to his mind, because I'm assuming he's really messed up because of parental abuse, partly, but that, like, or maybe she just grew up in a very messed up household, and all of the siblings were also. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Most likely, like he was abusive and she was sheltered up until a point or something.
Yeah, there probably has to be a reason that she killed him. Like, you don't go killing your parents just because you want to.
Yeah, it's not going to be that black and white because I think that Kaladin also mentions a couple of times. I don't think that he literally says murdered, but he feels like he's responsible for his brother's death. And then when you finally get to see how his brother died, he's not responsible. He is not responsible for Teen getting into the army, and he's not responsible for Teen then being at the front line. So he didn't have anything to do with it. So maybe it's somewhat the same with Shalom, where she might be responsible, but she didn't really want to murder him per se. So yeah, I do want to see what that is about. And I have also heard a couple of people say that she is pretty quirky and she has like that annoying kind of humor, but that it's also a coping mechanism. So that's why I have kind of high hopes for the second book that we are going to understand her better. Especially because Bryce also said upon a reread, she's now my favorite character. So maybe there's just something to her that I'm not seeing at this point.
I think so. Yeah, same.
Somebody. Yeah, the young king, I don't really like him as a character that much, just because I also don't really find it very consistent that he's that bad at ruling. Because he was the heir, and yes, his father died, and that was, of course, not really predictable. But at the same time, you would think that you're going to prepare him to be king at some time in his life.
Yeah,
So then he's a king, and he's horrible at it.
yeah,
I
and
didn't.
the weird thing is that his mom really calls him a failure, and that his mom knows that he's a bad ruler, but
Yeah.
she doesn't do anything to stop it. So I think there's some reasoning behind that as well. He's paranoid to the ultra extreme.
Because we go from having a king that gave his own life to like basically protect his kingdom to a guy that's like scared about a spider, maybe trying to kill him.
Yeah. Because even towards the end, it seems like he's starting to make the right decisions, but for the wrong reasons. Because he keeps saying, like, yeah, people are after me, so maybe we need to do something different. Yeah, that's part of it, but maybe also just because it's the right thing to do for your kingdom and the people that you're responsible for. You don't always have to think about yourself. At the same time, I do think that he tried to write that kind of paranoia because his father was assassinated. And of course, that's going to have an effect on you. But it felt like too much. He also should have thought about other people.
I was surprised that Dalinar didn't have a lower opinion of him. I feel like he kind of has it like blinders on because it's his nephew, and I feel like he should have more of a condemnation of how Elhokar rules and how kind of wanting him to like push it. I hope he pushes him more in the next few books, I guess.
Were you guys getting kind of nervous when like Sadeas was getting really like close to like the king and kind of pushing Dalinar aside? I was like, no, they're gonna turn on Dalinar. I feel like Dalinar was gonna be like, I don't know, excluded from the like whatever he was like in the political sense. So I don't know. I started getting nervous there because Sadeas was. I feel like they were kind of saying that Dalinar was the one trying to kill the nephew.
Yeah, and adding to Amy's thoughts, I really thought it was interesting that he has an unseen spouse or an unnamed spouse that's ruling the actual kingdom, and the young king is just playing soldier or playing king on this desert play field that's just like going out with toy soldiers to fight our big bad wolf. So it was like, yeah.
I totally agree, Hans. So I'm glad you said that because that's the reason why I think he's there. I think Dalinar does recognize that he's a spoiled little brat, and he's keeping him there instead of where he can actually make decisions on the. But that's so I totally agree. I think Dalinar recognizes him, but there's only so much he can do, especially because there's so much politics between all of the lesser kings, that he's having to deal with. But Dalinar is essentially, ruling what's going on the Shattered Plain, not Elhokar, but he still has to let Elhokar have his voice. He is the king. So I do think that he's doing the best he can to keep him in check. I don't think he's as blind as we think. I think, though, we're coming into the story in a point in Dalinar's life where he's got a lot going on, a lot of balls up in the air, and so it looks like he's not. But I think the reason why Elhokar is there not rolling is because he's like, this kid does not know what he's doing.
Place can do less damage. That makes sense. Actually.
Yeah, I do wonder if we ever, well, probably, if we're going to go back to the actual city and see what's happening there. Because Dalinar has mentioned a couple of times, we're fighting here, but at the same time, the longer that we're away, there are going to be threats towards our kingdom. And I also think that you see it in some of the flashbacks with Kaladin, where they're like, all of the shard bearers are now on the plains. We don't have a lot of them here, so people are trying to attack our borders. So I do like if in the future books we see some back and forth. I really enjoyed being on the Shattered Plains, but I would like to see that and maybe some more political intrigue in that region as well. But at the same time, I don't know if he's going to have the time for all of that, because this plot line that he's developed now with the Knights Radiant that we haven't even discussed yet, that's a lot that he needs to unpack.
I actually had a question right going into the Knights Radiant. Does anyone understand what the difference is between the Radiants and the Heralds and what their role was? Because that part lost me completely.
It'll start making more sense later on. I don't want to say anything because I don't know if it's a spoiler.
Okay, so that's kind of meant to be somewhat confusing.
Yeah.
To me,
I had like the feeling that the Heralds are like a step up from the Night Radiants, like more godlike creatures, but I'm not sure.
Was the prologue the Heralds or the Radiants? Like when we start with the ones that
I'm not sure about that one, because they do mention in the story that the knights were knights for the heralds, and that the heralds sort of have their own power circle. So it's like deities they are deities / gods. So each has one of the powers in this world, but it's a bit more clear to me as well. Yes, what is the prologue? I think it was a really weird way to start the story when we don't get any information about that later. It was nice being thrown into the world, but also maybe that part could have been a little bit further in the story, so it would not have been as confused when entering the first pages.
Yeah, exactly. I want that prologue is about the heralds, just because there are only 10. And I think that further along we see that there were like 300 Night Radiants at a certain point.
Okay.
But knowing what happened to those heralds, we have no idea, because 9 of them kind of just decided we don't want to do this anymore, and then the 10th still.
So
it's
like
that one.
the 10 wasn't like the hell or what they said. They were in a sort of rebirth area that would hurt a lot. So maybe it's connected to the figures that Shallan sees.
I feel like the
knight
that was left to be tortured, his name came up again toward the end of Way of Kings, but I don't remember in what context or what it was.
I don't know if this is true, but I thought he was the one that entered the portal or exited the portal or whatever it was with the Jester character in the end.
I think
there was
so,
like a character that exited a sort of portal or something, and then Wit said on, "Hey, old friend" or something. So, but I didn't page back to see if that was the same name as the first one.
I think that was it. Yeah.
That I feel like the heralds and the radiants are actually connected a lot to like the religions in this book. I feel like that's something we haven't touched on. There's a lot of religions, not a lot of different religions, but it's a lot, like a huge aspect to the story, because I remember Josna was trying to get convinced to be part of a certain religion, because the religion itself has like a strong political backbone to it, and it's just like the political and the religion are really entwined in this first book, at least. And I found it really fascinating how I feel like in this first book, Dalinar is having his visions, right, when the storms are happening. So having the religion happening with his thoughts when he goes back in time or whatever, it's really fascinating to see how through that way we're seeing like the complexity of the religions.
Yes.
And then there's the callings too, which I feel like is kind of tied into religion, the callings that you choose.
You know, Amaza, you just reminded me, Maria, when you asked me if the other books have other POVs, I remember now that the second book does have a POV. You will actually get the POV of what is the name of the it's not the Parthen. Is it Parthendi? Is that how you say it?
Parshendi?
And yes.
Yeah, the people they're fighting on the Shattered Plains.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
And
Oh, yeah.
they have a whole religion too that you kind of get,
Mm.
you know, from their point of view, you kind of get. So it is really neat. He does kind of, you know, explore these religions a little bit more in the second book. That I found that very fascinating. And when you read it, you'll understand why. I don't want to say anything because it's a spoiler, but
That's a cool POV choice. Yeah.
yeah.
That's right. I totally forgot about that because that's exactly the part that I'm at right now. The second book, like the Pershendi POV, and it's like really interesting because he was like in this first book we didn't get much about them, but in the second book, at least with those little POVs, you're gonna get a lot of information. You can be like, oh man, there's more to it than what we got in the first book.
That's nice. Because we've said a couple of times now, like, we're supposed to fight them, but we actually don't have any idea why they're fighting, because we know that they're not behind the assassination of the king. So why
Yes.
have they taken the claim that they did it? So yeah, I'm definitely going to be intrigued if we see some of their points of view and understand why they're fighting.
Well, even the characters, Kaladin's also like, we don't know why we're fighting them. So
Yes.
One of the things that I think Brandon Sanderson does here that he hasn't done in his other work is he really only tells you enough to know what's happening in the point of view of the character you're following. So you only know parts of the world that they know. And I know he does that in other books, but what is really neat what he does here is because you're seeing the point of view of their enemy, you're not really sure who the true enemy is. So like Caladan has a prejudice against Light Eyes, and then you are actually in the point of view of Dalinar, who is a Light Eyes, who is not this evil person that Caladan thinks he is. And then in the next book you'll be in the point of view of what you think that everybody's enemy is. And so it's really neat that he does that, because everybody thinks everybody else is a villain. Everybody else's enemy is the bad guy. And until you understand their motivations and the reasons why and the history, Brandon Sanderson has placed you in as a reader saying, okay, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. But then he's really good at twisting that, or at very least making you or challenging that, because he's giving you a different point of view. So it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Although there definitely are bad guys that don't change from being bad guys.
I wonder who.
Sadeas.
yeah, we'll never trust him again. That's it. He's dead to us.
Exactly. Now, there's actually something that I don't really, I'm not quite sure about. How many magic systems do we have? Because like Sazet, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he uses Stormlight, right? And
he and Kaladin
does the same thing.
Kaladin
So
has
they have the same type of magic, and if that's true, are they both Night Radiance? Or is Sazet then the bad guy? But he has the same
poker face. I don't know.
I think we'll get info about that, because in other Sanderson stories, the way the magic systems are tied to the main characters are mostly important. The main characters don't just learn magic like in Harry Potter to have fun, or not that part of storytelling isn't good, because I really love that part also. But in Sanderson stories, it's very much focused to the plot, and assuming this is in the same line, we'll get more info. But it's interesting to see two different characters use the magic, because you can see it's more like a tool, so that's the inventiveness and the creativity of the person behind the magic changes the way the magic is used. So I think in that way it was really interesting to see such a vicious person use magic, and such a creative person who wants to get out of a depressive situation use the magic, because they use them in very different ways with the same rules. And I really enjoy that exploration of magic.
You have to think of it as almost like one magic system, but two different ways to use it. So if you think about Mistborn, the only people who can use magic are the ones who can ingest and burn the metals, right? But in this world, there are those people who can make the magic, and then there's those who can use tools that can't wield magic themselves, but they can wield tools that use magic. So that there's not really multiple magic systems. There's just multiple ways to utilize it. And like I said, in the second book, it really explains that more. And oh God, I think the second book you guys are gonna love because it's more world building, but it's more active world building that actually pushes the story along. And so I think you guys will enjoy it.
I almost felt like Zeth's power was too undefeatable. Like it was cool to see the contrast of him versus Kaladin learning and kind of starting out to explore it. But I almost felt like when he was facing like shard bearers that there should have been more difficulty and he was able to, and I get that he's like so advanced at this point, but I want there to be something that challenges him to some degree. I want to see something that makes him get a little bit wounded or have them, not necessarily be able to accomplish his end goal.
Well, it would be fun because we know that Sazed is going after Dalinar. That we're gonna get that fight, and that Dalinar maybe doesn't kill him, but actually gives him a sort of challenge.
Yeah, and Dalinar is the type of character that I don't really know what he's going to be about because he has those, episodes during a high storm, and then at the end we also realize that the person who's talking to him is actually the Almighty, but he's killed by I don't know the name anymore, but definitely like the bad entity of the two. So he has those episodes. He definitely has a role to play, but is his role bringing together the Knights Radiance? Because that's what keeps being told. Bring them together. And he thinks that it's about the High Princes, but it might also be about the Knights Radiance. And that's why he had to trust Sadeas, because that brought him towards Kaladin, who is, I think, the first one. But I don't really know if Dalinar himself has powers.
Yeah, touching upon a little part of that, I found it a little bit funny that he sort of listened his whole life as if the voice was his conscience, and then in the end it was just a sort of like audio message that he listened, and all the things he said kind of conveniently fit into the conversation. I found that a little bit funny, but yeah, I don't think he gets any powers except for the powers that his equipment gave him.
And isn't Shallan trying to I think she figures out towards the end that she has something too, huh? That she's gonna try to harness. So I wonder what her I know they showed a little glimpse of her power, but I wonder what her whole potential is gonna be towards the end.
And she could do it without any device, if I'm correct. But Yelena, I was going to say that I feel like Sanderson's classic shtick is that he says someone's like the hero or the god or the almighty, and then it's the villain. Or like he says that like these are the force, that we're going to war against the Parshendi, and then turns out actually like maybe, or like the big twists are always like all the things we thought we knew were wrong. So then I'm like, I know I want to trust Dalinar's visions, and I want to trust that he is being led towards some greater goal, but I also I feel like I should be scared that he's actually going to be following like the villain's end goal all along or something like that.
That would be nice.
That's a really interesting viewpoint.
Yeah. Stacey's really hyping that book too.
Yes, exactly. Now, after finishing this one today, I also want to start book 2 as soon as possible because he always does that. His endings are so big and grand, and he drops a couple of bombs that you just want to know what that's all about. So now I also want to start book 2, but I can't. I have to read other books in between, but next month, yes, I'm going to start book 2.
The good thing is we have 3 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you finish it early, you'll forget. So
I actually want to give it a little bit more time. I finished it at the end of March, so I finished it a month ago, but I don't feel ready to go into the second one yet. I need a few more stories in between to cleanse because I know it's gonna the Way of Kings took me about a month to read. I don't read too much in a day, so for me I need a little bit more extra stories in between before I go another month with only this story.
When I read a book this size, what happened, Stacey?
I said I'm the same way. I like to have things in between so you don't feel like you're spending too much time with those characters because it can get redundant and I don't say boring, but you just kind of get sick of them.
Yeah, normally I don't mind reading a trilogy back to back, but that's 1,000 pages in total, and this is 1,000 pages per book.
Yeah, look at Maz's copy. Look at that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. When I finished this bad boy, I felt like whenever people saw me I think I started reading it when I was still working, and I would take it to my work, and I would open up my big book. They were like, "Oh, that's a big book," and they're like, "You're actually gonna finish it?" And I was like, "I don't know, people like the size of this is pretty impressive." So when I finished it, I was really happy. I was like, "I actually finished this mammoth,"
Mhm.
and then I have all the other books that are the same
Accomplishment.
size. So.
Yeah.
And now I'm also thinking, I don't really know when the novellas come in between. Do we have to read a novella between book 1 and 2?
Oh, I think the novella comes between. Yeah, the novella comes between book 2 and 3.
Oh, okay. So now we
Do you
can jump
have to
into
read
book
it?
2.
Because I kind of don't want to.
Oh, you have to read it.
Okay.
I haven't read Dawn Shard, which is the second novella, because I haven't started Rhythm of War yet. But the and now I can't. Edge Dancer. Oh, that is my favorite character.
Okay. I just don't love novellas, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good novella though. He doesn't, but I think in this case, you don't have to read it, but then you won't know that character when you go into the third book.
Wait, so where do I find the novellas?
So Edge Dancer you can get by itself, but it's also in the Arcanum book.
Yeah, he has a anthology collection that has some of these stories from various universes in them.
I think Edge Dancer might even be free on his website. So go check out his website because there's some of his novellas you can get for free.
And I think even
Oh,
more Breaker, because I read it on his website as a lunch break every time, and it's the final edit. So I think that maybe in the final book of Warbreaker, like some minor details were changed, but the story in itself is for free on his website.
Oh, okay, so it's $10.
Yeah, that one.
I didn't even know there was novellas. Oh man.
Even more to read.
I know.
Yeah. One thing I enjoyed about the story is I first bought the same mass market, but I thought this book is gonna get wrecked, so I bought a nice copy that I to read at home. And this nice copy has these maps in the front that weren't the map of the world we are in. It's like an ancient world, so I am interested to see why he decided to include these maps in this story when clearly this isn't something that we are delving into yet. So I am interested to see in the second book if it has the same and front pages, and if we get more information about this world, because I was totally confused. I assume the symbols are the symbols that the men are allowed to use because the men can't write in this world. The woman can.
Oh yeah,
So
I really
yeah.
liked that about
That
it.
was
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
that was
Totally forgot
interesting.
about that,
Yes,
yeah.
and so I assume that's those symbols, but I don't know for sure.
The other thing that I noticed that was pretty interesting was the hand. Like cover their hand.
Yes.
That's supposed to be really modest, and like I think there was a part in the book where like her like covering kind of came off, and he kind of saw her hand, and she was like, "Oh no, he saw my hand." I was like, "Bro, what?"
And they eat.
Like,
I found that the most bizarre. Like they eat female and male foods.
Oh yeah.
oh
And
yeah.
funny that same. I wonder if that's just like a cultural thing, or I mean, it probably isn't anything more to it. But it was an interesting, like it was just so regimented.
Yes,
But
exactly.
they
And
try
that's
to
why.
like
Go ahead, Maza.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say they try to like that scene that I was talking about. They try to make it seem very like seductive, and I was like, "What? It's just her hand."
It's like the ankle, in like Victorian way, like show an ankle. Oh god.
Yeah. And like, there's two hands, so why is the left hand sexy and the right hand is normal? So.
Exactly. That's like the sort of thing that I like, those types of world building, and that you have those snippets. But at the same time, when you think about it further, it doesn't really make sense. So things like that he should have explained maybe better, because like with the ankles in Victorian times, it's not like you were allowed to see the left one but not the right one. Both of them were just as scandalous. And here it's one hand is okay, but the other one isn't. And then I think that we see a prostitute in a certain scene, and like she's extremely scandalous because you can see both her hands. And it just was a little bit weird to me that he didn't really explain that, and that feels like almost forced world building. While the other things that you have women who are allowed to write and men who are not allowed to write, that felt more natural almost, because I could understand why some of those changes happen in culture. And also because when you then go back in time, you actually see that in the past there were men who were writing. So something happened. You just don't know it yet, but there is an explanation.
Yeah, and
But
I found
maybe
it.
in future books we see what's wrong with the hands as well.
And I find it a strong metaphor because I mentioned the Pashandi had the woman and man working together in the battlefield, but the humans have it actually outside the battlefield because the woman have to recite books to the man
Yeah.
to get them to learn about military strategy and sort of stuff. So what the Pashani have in battle, the humans have outside of battle. So it's interesting the similarities between these things and yeah,
Exactly.
the effects that not being able to read or write has to a whole section of the population.
Yeah, because even the
Yeah, I like
bookseller,
that. Go ahead,
oh, go
Bonza.
ahead. I was just gonna say, even the bookseller, when she was trying to buy books for him, was like, "Oh, I haven't read the books, but my wife's read them to me." It's kind of like, bro, you're selling the books. How have you not read them yourself? Like, and then I don't know. It's just like bizarre to think that the man can't read and don't want to read either. And then I don't know. It's just
I was just gonna say I like that that he put in gender roles that the women are still have a purpose. So they're not like in a lot of other fantasy where they just sit at home and make babies and do the cooking and the men go out to war. The women still have a purpose. They have a purpose in war. They have a purpose in ruling. Women can become scholars, men can't. So I liked that. You know, it makes sense for a culture to build along gender lines, but so it wouldn't have made sense for the women and the men to do everything. That wouldn't for us coming from the Western world for us to really understand that, right? So he built in something that made sense, but and didn't have like an oppressed gender. Instead, they have an oppressed class, but that's a whole other.
Yeah, especially because I feel like learning to read and write is such a, even in our like culture and history, it's such a barrier that was instituted for like during slavery and things like that. When people, that was considered the, like you said, exactly, like the oppression is not having access to the words in the literature and to reading and writing. And so it's interesting that like I would assume that the men would be given that power, and instead it's a reversal.
Yeah. Because I also like that the women actually like wrote their own remarks at the end of the page, but they just never told the men. So they didn't know that they were actually being like criticized here and there. Like I made this a little bit prettier because he's not that smart. Like
Yeah, I love that.
Kind of on a similar note as like that division, I thought that I think there's going to be more to it, I'm assuming, with the light eyes, dark eyes, because I feel like right now all we know is that like there's just people who are born with light eyes and people who are born with dark eyes, but you can become a light eyes by getting a shard blade, or is that just propaganda? Like we don't really know, is this just a cultural difference of different races and therefore that determines your rank in life, or is there more like a magical background to it? I'm really interested to know about that.
Yeah, and what I find interesting is that it's a lot of these things we're discussing is stuff that's sadly part of our own world, but it's done differently. So, for in the human world, it's sadly skin color, but in the world that Branson Sanderson is creating, it's eye color. And when I read the book, I looked around to people I knew, and I began to understand from they have light eyes and they have dark eyes, so they would be elite and they would be the peasants. And I was like, whoa, they changed it so much. So I love that it also changes the perspective on other things that happen in our world, even though that's not the intention clearly, but
It's also different because the light eyes are the minority, but they're the ruling class here, which is kind of, it makes you wonder about the history. Like Maria was saying, where does that come from? Because you would think at some point the dark eyes people would be like, hey, there's way more of us than there are of you. But if they have a reason for thinking that they are not as powerful as the light eyes, where does that history come from?
Yeah, and I think that that's also hinted because when Dalinar has one of his episodes, he sees that one of the dark eyes is actually an officer, I don't know what the ranks in the army are, but it was pretty high up, right? And so he was pretty surprised because this is a dark eye. So again, something happened in history that made that shift, but then also nobody knows about it. So it's being hidden somehow. And I do hope that when that reveal comes, it gives a satisfying explanation.
And if you think about the fact that the women are the one writing history, considering unless that also was different in the past, like was can we trust the histories? Was stuff left out, or is it interesting?
Well, Steve, you have 3 months to read Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, and then you can join us.
Yeah.
I
That's
also
only
want to
2,000 pages.
Isn't Kaladin said to be like Kaladin is a Light Eye's name? I don't know if that'll be more of a reveal too,
Ooh,
but I
yeah.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's indeed interesting.
He like stands out from his group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because now you say it, I do think back on it that light eyes have these very long and fancy names, and these dark eyes have very short and to the point names. I didn't realize them up until you mentioned it just now.
That's why he wants to go by Cal until he then later on is like, actually call me Kaladin.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And he actually had the choice, or at least at some point the chance, to pick up a short sword, but he decides not to. And in the end, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that he made at that point because it killed his entire crew. Now,
Well,
I also don't know if that's like supposed to happen, if it's fate, because he is destined to become something bigger in that army, or is that the path that he had to walk to become what he is in the end? Or would he be the same but then even more powerful with that blade?
Because like the trust level there, where he puts the general that he had once, like we trusted him, and he trusted him a lot too. So it's like no one can be trusted because as we were seeing people that we thought were good turning on each other, and it's like I think Stacy brought it up too, where it's like their enemy is my enemy, but at the end it's like no one's enemy. They're just showing their point of view. So like, but I feel like the general really did Kaladin shady right there because it was his. And he says that he earned it. I think later on they say that he earned it. And I was like, bro, what? No, you didn't.
and he killed everyone.
Yeah.
So nobody would know.
And then Kaladin became a slave, but it's like, man.
Mm-hmm. But I think that his name was Amaron or something like that. But somebody said at a certain point that he is going to join the big war on the plain. So I think that maybe there's going to be some interaction with Kaladin later on, especially now that Kaladin is higher with Dalinar's army and he's going to be a personal bodyguard. Maybe he's going to have an interaction with Amaron later on. I don't know how that's going to go.
Amaranth like showing up like, hey Dalinar, holy shit, that's Kaladin.
Exactly.
Wait, you're supposed to be a slave.
Yeah. I still go back to that end scene with Syl where she says something about feeling uncomfortable around a shard blade. And to me, that signifies that probably, even though I, as a reader, am very upset that both Kaladin and Dalinar like gave up theirs, I feel like that must be actually in the end, and it'll probably be something good, like a good thing in the long run that they did.
Yeah. And what's exciting about the second book is that actually all the character points are being sent to the Shattered Plains instead of being separated. Both Shallan and the assassin are being sent to the Shattered Plains, so we'll get the conversion of all these characters together. So that's going to be something interesting to look forward to.
It feels like the MCU, where like all of the
Yeah, I've been meaning to mention the MCU in this because there's a lot of similarities in other parts as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually saw some very negative review, which was a lot of fun to watch as well because I like to see rant reviews, especially if it's for like a super famous author who's not going to feel any effect about it. But he said like, it's just like super cheap superheroes, and I don't understand why everybody likes it. It's just like Marvel and MCU, and I was sitting there like, yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's bad.
No. There's just a lot of similarities. They're all given their separate stories before joining, and there's post-credit scenes and stuff. So yeah,
Exactly.
That's really funny.
So in this case, would Sadie's be like Thanos or what?
No, say as is Loki. only
More of a,
yeah, only we don't like Sadeas in the end that we do with Loki.
he's just General Ross or someone annoying that we don't like.
Yeah, indeed.
So we've almost been talking for 2 hours. I don't know, maybe we should wrap up and start the second book. I'm just going to quickly mention before we might give our closing remarks that I am going to open up the on my Discord, like the different topics for the second book. So I'm going to do that after the live stream so we can jump on. I'm not going to start right away. I need to have like some palette cleansers in between, but then we're right off. We can start if we want to. But is there anything else that you wanted to mention, or just like some general ideas what you think about the second book? Now's the time.
I'm just hyped. I'm just excited to see, and yeah, this was really fun to discuss the book. It puts the book even more into perspective to talk about it with other people, even though I don't know all of you. It was really fun to just chat about it. So I look forward to doing that with, especially with these big fancy books. So I'm hyped to read them and then discuss a little bit of the details with others.
I was gonna give some theories, but I'm already halfway through the second book, so I don't think I'm capable of giving a theory without spoiling something. So I'll just say that if you guys are in for a treat in the second book, like so far it's good, and I'm like those type of people that if I don't like something, like I won't care, I'll DNF it and I won't pick it up. This second book, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is one where I read it and I gave it 4 stars and felt very like it was good. But then the more I think about it, the more I'm excited to get back to that world and those characters. Like the more that I feel like I miss them and they live with me and I want to know where they go. So I feel like it has potential to become something that I'm really invested in and really loving. And I'm probably going to pick up the next one, probably like end of next month, I think, start it.
Okay.
I can't really say much because I've already read the second book, but I can say that I'm really excited for our next meeting to hear what you guys think about it. I just think that it starts to explain a lot of the questions you've mentioned here. And I think there'll be a lot more to discuss in there because a lot of things change, perspectives. You get more perspectives. The characters evolve tremendously in the second book. So,
okay.
I can't personally say.
Go ahead, Maria.
Did you say this first one was your favorite, or
the first one's my favorite only because it was my first experience with an epic fantasy, but the second one is a better book, if that makes sense.
I had the exact same question. So, that's nice.
Same minds.
Yeah, I want to see more of Dalinar and especially Shallan and Jasna because I don't really know at this point if they have the same magic system or not. They can both do some stuff, but is it going to be exactly different, or are they also Knight Radiants but just with different types of power? I don't know if they all have the exact same type of power, or maybe they're like superheroes and each of them has like their own strengths. So yeah, definitely very excited for the second book.
Yeah, it depends on what radioactive bug bit them.
And to Lila and other people in the chat, it was really interesting to hear your thoughts as well. So thank you for being here as well.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for being in the chat because Lila also asked some very interesting questions that I read and I thought about it while reading, but then I didn't really come back to it. And after finishing the entire book and knowing the characters more, it's nice to think about some of those more philosophical questions that Sanderson rose in this book and just think a little bit deeper. So yeah, definitely thanks everybody in the chat here, of course, on stream for joining. It was definitely a very interesting discussion and I can't wait for book 2.
It's a great discussion. Thanks for setting the read along up, Yolene.
Yeah, and